Hi and welcome to Skills for Mars. Today I'm hosting my friend and mentor Alison Grieve. Alison is joining us for the third time. We started the podcast together, we shared champagne during the 1-year anniversary recording, and today we are celebrating episode 100. Our chosen topic for the day is team resilience. While systemic, organizational, and individual resilience are subjects often discussed, team resilience is significantly less so. Looking at the data, it is also where teams score the lowest. Management Dynamics, the company Alison co-founded together with Jenny Miller, measures team resilience, discusses its importance with HR and business leaders, and actively supports them on the journey to overcoming their vulnerabilities. Join me as I pick Alison's brain so we can better understand the why, what, and how of team resilience. Through this podcast, we are bringing the future of work closer to you. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comment section below. Your views and your feedback are extremely important to the development of the podcast. Enjoy our conversation. Hi, Alison, and welcome back for the third time on Skills for Mars.
I know, I can't believe it. 3 times already. You've obviously not had enough of me yet. But...
No, definitely not. And it's very nice to do all the first episode, the 1-year anniversary, the 100th episode. So I always feel like I get this privilege of having you when it's an anniversary.
Well, happy anniversary again. It's always good to have something to celebrate, isn't it?
Definitely, right? That's part of the team routines.
Yes, it is very much.
And the magical part is that you're also the go-to person for high-performing teams. So I always feel like there's something new to talk with you when we talk about teams. Let's just start with the changes that you've seen since we last spoke. I think the last discussion we had on teams was somewhere in November when we had the anniversary episode. What has changed in that amount of time? What have you seen? Because you've worked with a lot of teams, online and offline, in this period.
Yeah, well, since we last spoke, I actually counted it up. So we've worked with just around 20 organizations and 162 teams.
That's quite a lot.
It is a lot.
Massive.
Yeah. So I can't say that I've personally done that, but as a company, Management Dynamics has done that. And so it's a lot of teams, and with most of those teams, we've been working with them over an elapsed period of time. So we've been working with them, for like 3, 6, 12 months, and some of them longer. And so it's been really interesting to see what's happened to them through this period.
And what are the conclusions after 20 organizations and 162 teams?
Well, resilience is the lowest thing of all the aspects, because within the framework that we use, we talk about there being some different dynamics that you need. So there, your purpose, your reason, why do you exist, results, having clarity, the relationships, routines need to be really focused and running smoothly, and then resilience, that bouncing forward and learning and also having energy and make sure everybody's supported. And out of all of those teams, 162 teams, every time it scores lowest, resilience.
Why? Do we know why?
Well, yes, I think it's because nobody focuses on it. So it's the last thing anybody thinks about. There's lots of talk about well-being, but that's all at an individual level. And I think organisations also do and have done quite a lot of work at an organisational resilience. How do you make sure you've got good cash flow and crisis plans? And, so they have those in place, and they have been putting in lots of stuff about mental health and well-being and things, which is, again, focused at individuals. Nobody's really talked about the team. And I think the team is the cornerstone of it. I think actually as a human mechanism of a community, teams are fundamental to the individual's growth, the individual's well-being. And I think we all know when we're part of a good team that it feels good. We can flourish and be at our best. And I think it helps us both physically and mentally too. But we focus on the results mostly. So that's where it goes. Yeah.
So if we stay with resilience, Did you notice what drives resilience in teams?
So what we have found is that by working on the other factors, so particularly working on reason, for example, and results, so helping the team to really understand, why do we exist as a team? What's the purpose of the team? Why do I want to be part of this team? What's my individual connection to this team? And what's in it for me? And do I understand what's in it for everybody else? Because we all have different reasons for being parts of teams and what we get out of it. So it might not always be what's stuck on the label, that there's all the other reasons that we're there. And it's understanding that as a team and uncovering that really starts to generate that sense of purpose and reason and motivates. And, Simon Sinek and loads of people have great research on this, but my experience with those teams is absolutely the awe that they get when they hear each other talking about what's important to them at work and how they get that and what they find really satisfying and what's been a great achievement and why, and how that links into their personal values is really eye-opening for other people. They're like, oh, I've known you and worked with you for 10 years and I never knew that. And it's a lovely way to induct new people because teams are dynamic. They never stay the same. People are coming and going all the time. And, I think we just have to accept that. But when they do, new people come in and they bring something else. And so it's a lovely way to introduce people to the team is to talk about why do we exist and what's our purpose and what's our reason. And then you can get into the clarity of results. So who does what and how do you know if you're successful and what would amazing look like? The other thing we do is actually get teams to talk about what is high performance. Most of them don't know. They all operate at average or good. That's good enough. That's all they get asked. But if you say, well, what is high performance? And how close are you? And what would it take? I think those are good conversations to have as well. When you review a team that you've been working with, say, over 6 months, you say, well, where are we? How are you doing against high performance? What's your view of high performance now? It changes. We get a shifting view. Our expectations, our aspirations shift. That also is a really strengthening thing. But as we're working on those, of course, we're having conversations, we're sharing. And so it builds relationships. So you don't have to do we're going to talk relationships. You can do other stuff and it opens up relationships at the same time. And what we've also found is it impacts resilience. So even just doing a small piece of work on working with reason and results, we've seen increases of 7%, for example, in resilience. And that's not saying we're going to do resilience, just talking about other stuff.
So it seems like the other 4 dynamics are mediators for resilience. You work on them and then resilience automatically increases.
Yeah, and there's still some things you can do in addition for resilience, but we would suggest you start elsewhere. Let's get the reason really loud and clear, because when we all know if you're into sport, for example, and you're out there training, you've got to keep in mind why you're doing it when you're really exhausted and want to give up. It's just like, just a couple more because then I've met my goal and I really want to get there. And so it's hanging on to that purpose that gets you over that line. And so you need that really clear. It's a clarion call that really helps people through tough times. So that's why we would say it's absolutely critical. And with COVID, teams needed that massively. It was like, what are we about and how are we going to get through this? Yeah.
We spoke about the lowest of the dynamics in terms of ratings. Is there one that scores the highest?
Well, with the teams that we work with, of course, it's reason.
Okay.
So it's reason. However, I would say that when we start working with teams, it can vary. Often there's not much clarity in terms of results. People kind of know a bit about what they're doing, but they don't always have the granularity of, who does what. Yeah. And so that's, and how do I collaborate more with others? Particularly if you've got teams who are geographically spread and they have kind of similar roles, but they're in different geographies. And they're sort of, I don't really know what he does over there. And I don't really care. But of course, we're a team and part of our job is to say, well, okay, what work out what we should care about and what's useful to care about too. Yeah, what's in it.
Isn't that fascinating? You work with a bunch of people and you share a common goal, but you never care how the other person contributes to that goal, or you have no idea how they contribute to that goal. Why does this happen?
But it happens lots.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many people who just get heads down, working away on their own thing, individual goals. I mean, I think the whole way reward and recognition systems are set up in organizations is to support individuals. So you get in there and you need to achieve your stuff. It doesn't mean say you're a nasty person to everybody else. You can be a fun colleague and chat away. But you don't really need to know necessarily what they're all doing or how. And often it doesn't matter to you because you just need to get your stuff done with your team. So, quite often I come to teams who have their teams as well. So you might have big leadership teams and, they really siloed. And it's hard to break down those barriers into working out, well, what can we work on together? Because often they really don't see it. Yeah.
I have so many questions coming to my mind, but sitting with teams that actually don't communicate and don't share what each of them is doing, is this... I don't want to blame someone or pinpoint a cause, but would it help if there would be leadership in place to actually run this kind of conversations? Or would someone in the team need to start this conversation? Or would there be maybe a routine that they need to put in place so they can have these conversations? Any answer so that can be more on the table and more discussed between them, rather than 3-6 months, they have a consultant, they do all of this, but then they go back to their old comfortable selves.
Yeah. I mean, my view about things. I obviously am a consultant, but I don't want people to be dependent on me. I want to build the teams up so that them and the leader carry on without me and they never need to see me again. We want them to be able to do it on their own. A high-performing team shouldn't need someone to hold their hand all the time. But because it's a complex skill, it's not a simple skill. We talk about, team building, but to get to high performance is really tough. It is like, mining and finding a diamond. They are really rare. There's not that many around. They're extremely valuable. I mean, the results, the business results of high performance are incredible. The kind of scores you can get, 50, 60 times the productivity. And the retention and the engagement you get, because we all love it when we've been in that sort of moment. I mean, that's when you grow and you have amazing relationships that last forever, is through those kind of moments of high performance. So it's something that when you've got it is amazing, but it's work. I mean, just like a diamond, you have to dig for it. They're rare and it needs a lot of work. And it's not a one-off thing. If you leave a diamond lying around, it's going to get dirty and it needs shining. Polishing. Same with high performance. You don't just get there and that's it done. And I think that's it. It's complicated. There's a skill involved in it. And we need to spend a lot more time with leaders and team members, helping them to understand what's important in getting to high performance. Where are they now? What are the tools they can use to take them there? And then they can practice and learn and eventually do it themselves. And I think that's the key thing here. And it's why we came up with the diagnostic, because there were so many factors. And within our little diagnostic, I think we've got 25 questions. It takes 5 minutes on your phone to answer it. But it's a way for a team themselves to track where they are. And they can just sort of take little pulses and go, we need to work on some of our routines at the moment. That's scoring a bit lower. Or looks like we're having a bit of trouble speaking up in meetings. Let's just, think about that. Or, the energy is dropping a bit. The resilience needs to come in. Or, reason we were great, it's kind of falling back. So it gives them a chance to see where they go and then do it themselves. But it is about these continuous conversations, but on different topics that will help the team get to and then sustain high performance.
You keep talking about high performance. what is it? And I'm not looking for the theoretical definition of high performance, but when you ask teams to define what high performance means for them, are there commonalities in the way they define high performance?
Yeah, I think that there's two key aspects to it. One is the actual results themselves. So there's something about above and beyond results that feels exceptional, that they're really, and that people are proud of. And then there's something about how people feel. And it's a group feeling. It's everybody feeling that together. And within that group feeling, there's the support and people having each other's backs that's there, but also that sense of challenge, that they're all doing something a bit crazy and beyond each of them separately. So those are the couple of things I'd say is coming out, is that so there is descriptions when we ask teams, what's high performance for you? How would you know if you were there? Or what are we aiming at? And we'll get a list of, this would mean we were at high performance. And then they start to talk about how they'll feel as well. Yeah.
Talking about this, did you find that lately teams talk more about their feelings, their emotions? There's a lot of hype, at least in what I'm reading, but I'm not sure if this is reality as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a huge reality. I mean, we force teams to talk a little bit about it. Okay. So we ask them those questions. But I'd also say, there's a lot of pressure. The teams we work with are in really competitive markets and industries. It's been a huge, tough time in terms of resourcing and, managing their workload, the pressures of COVID and supply chain and recruiting and all sorts of things been immense, changing working practices and so on. So I think, for them, talking about feelings can sometimes feel really naff. They're, very task-focused bunch. But I think there's been a side with COVID which has opened up more compassion and a better understanding of people's wider context, and that, we need to take that into account. So I do think there is a more respect for it and a greater understanding that it's something that needs to be considered.
Do you think that talking about feelings, about the energy, about the group feeling, not only individual, would help them reach higher performance easier? Or it's not necessarily something useful?
I think it is useful, and mainly because of the diverse people in teams. So there'll be some people in the team who will really enjoy and benefit and flourish from that. And there are others who maybe that's not their thing. But I think, the idea of the team is we include everybody because it's all together. When you're really talking about what's this high performance, it's greater than the sum of the whole, so we're wanting everybody to contribute more. So for some people, they need to be able to talk about, what their reactions are. And that's a way of communicating what's really going on. And even for those most tasky focused people, they also have feelings, and they get annoyed at people. Well, there's a lot of talk about psychological safety and challenging and being able to speak out. And even in very mature groups, there's times when you think, well, why did nobody say anything? Why did nobody speak out? And that's about feelings, isn't it? It's not feeling safe. And you have to be really brave to say those words. I don't feel safe in this team to say what I think. And I've not met many teams where somebody is prepared to just go, there's no way I'm going to talk about that here. And it's a slow process to get to a place where people can say, I don't understand, or why are we doing this, or this isn't going to work.
Maybe even recognizing that feeling is something not a lot of individuals in teams do, because they feel annoyed, they feel frustrated, and they just feel it like that, but they don't go deeper into understanding why necessarily, and then that the extra step of talking about it is even harder.
Well, the other thing is that, as many of us are not trained to even recognize our feelings, let alone label them, and then articulate them. So we spend so much time just pushing them away and not noticing them, particularly in the work environment. So there is a lot there, of just noticing and recognizing, and sometimes saying to somebody, you look a bit like you're annoyed at the moment, or you look like you're really enjoying yourself. Starting to label what you notice.
You spoke about teams having that sense of challenge, and that immediately took me to Csikszentmihalyi's flow. And mostly when we talk about flow, we talk about an individual. Is there a way to keep teams in flow?
Yeah, I mean, that for me is one of the descriptions that you hear people talking about when they're describing high performance, is that flow, and they're all in it together. And you can imagine the energy when you have that. It's all working smoothly, and the teams are laughing and mirroring and working so well together and enjoying that buzz. That's flow for teams. And to get there, that all of the pieces need to be in place. That's when the relationships are beautiful and people can read each other and know where they are, know when they need to jump in and help out or support someone or let them have some more space. And it's also because the routines are just rocking along and everybody knows what to do when, and the communication flows are going well and decision making's clear. And at the same time, they're all, really clear about what they're doing and why. So for me, it's really about making sure you have all of those dynamics nailed down, and you'll start to see that flow and maintaining that flow living within the team.
What have you noticed in the team you've been working with? How much time is it enough to focus on the 5 dynamics to get to that flow? Is it 3 months, 6 months? Is it an ongoing thing? When do they start noticing the results?
Well, I think whenever you're working with a team and you're working with the different dynamics, we would say, 3 to 6 months, we can see a big difference in the team. And in all the teams we've worked with, because we're tracking the diagnostic, we're seeing big shifts. We're seeing shifts of, 11, 13% with, a couple of half-day sessions, which can be run virtually or face-to-face. So I think it's giving the team the time to work through some of those aspects that they've never given the space to, that they can then go on. And then I think ongoing, what we've noticed is with some support, teams, if they're doing something quarterly, maybe even just for 90 minutes, 2 hours, can maintain it. So this is, not about adding extra things on, that are really heavy and take lots of time, but it's about using your current processes and the current routines and layering things in so that you're streamlining it. And then what you do is you add in small pieces for the team to reflect on themselves as a team and where they're going.
Alison, can we do a bit of an exercise, something quite practical? Maybe something you've noticed with your teams. I was thinking in practical terms to ask you, lately I've been working with the multinationals, right? And most of their teams are very siloed, right? Let's take, the HR function. And these are highly capable people, but very much focused on either their own business or a vertical of the business or just corporate. And everyone seems to be doing their little bit of work. They do it really well. But there's very little collaboration. There's very little communication. There's very little co-creation together. And you just feel that by having them together and breaking those silos would definitely benefit them. But because they are located in so many different places, because their focus is different, because their goals are measured in a different way maybe, and they only have a few processes they need to align, but they don't need to work together on them, it's very hard to bring them together. What would you do to start thinking about breaking those silos?
I think it's a really interesting one, and it exists not just in HR, but other functions too. Finance have a similar kind of thing. IT often.
HR was an example, so
commercial
I was keeping it in-house.
There's plenty of teams that I've worked with who have these kind of issues. And in some ways, you could say that the easiest teams are the ones that are working today, every day, daily, on very similar kind of things. Whether they're multifunctional teams, like a leadership team for a country, for example, they meet and they're a pure leadership team, but they all know they're responsible in some way or another for the P&L and the success of that business. Although you get silos there too. But I think for those matrix ones that run across, and it's a functional area, there are particular challenges from that silo mentality, because people are so connected into their areas, and then you have your corporate or your centres of excellence teams, or whatever you want to call them, who then layer across. But when they're working as a team in their team meetings, there's not much sharing, and also not much interest really in other people's stuff, because it's like, well, what can I learn from you? And I think that's the place to start, which is, what is the point of this team? And really get to the nitty gritty of, how can we use this group of people to all our benefit? What do we want to get out? What would make us all successful individually and as a function be successful? And therefore, where can we collaborate, and what do we share, and what do we build, and what do we co-create? Because often you'll see that some of the frustrations come when you have corporate excellence groups creating things and then firing it out to the others, and they're like, oh, not another one, or I haven't got time for that. Or I was talking to somebody yesterday, and he said, do you know, they just create it and sent out. They didn't even ask me what I thought, and I've got lots of experience. I'd love to have shared it. And they say it's global, but nobody talked to me. And I think that's a missing point. So
you'd get all of them together in one room to share.
All need to be in, and we're talking about reason. Why do you exist? And what's the purpose? And so there's no point having everybody there to talk about everything, but what is the core things that this team could really share and work on together that would add real value, that they could then take back into the rest of their work? I think it's about finding that and giving time to identify that, rather than saying, oh, we're all in HR, we're all this level, so we come together. It's like, well, yeah. I remember sitting through boring meetings, that had nothing to do with me, talking about other people's work and thinking, I'd much rather be going on with my stuff. And so how do we make sure we don't repeat that kind of stuff?
Yeah, and we don't make it monotonous, but have something exciting in common.
Yeah, it should be exciting. If we're talking about flow, how do we get that flow? And to get that flow, has got to be engrossing. It's got to be something that's interesting, which means you have to fundamentally believe it's going to add you value.
Yeah, for sure. Still talking about relationships, one of my latest questions about teams, relationships, and networks has been moving away from the individual and looking a bit broader on how a team and how the ecosystem in a company for that particular individual influences their performance and potential. Because we generally think of the individual, of their skills, of their knowledge, are they unique enough, did he perform well enough in the past, then let's just promote this guy or girl to a higher level. They get into a new team, they fail, we dismiss them. But we never question what contributed to their success and their failure in a broader way, not as an individual. How can companies, map the effect of a team on the individual, or map the impact that they can have on their performance and their potential? Is there a way to start thinking about it? I don't think there's a tool or a right way to do it, but is there a way to start thinking about it?
Yeah, and it's taking a more systemic view about teams. And about all the people that are in it, and what's the ecosystem of that group within the organisation. And there's some lovely tools that you can use with teams to map it. One of my favorites is Lego Serious Play.
Okay.
You create great models. So here's one I just happen to have to hand, which I really like. Sort of create models which teams then, talk about, and then you can build, there's a whole methodology behind it, but you can create the connections and describe the connections across the team. And because it becomes a sort of mobile model, one group I was working with a couple of years ago, they had it in their office and they'd go and change something and then pull bits and see what happened. And they could describe how that analogy then came back into the workplace. So it helped them think through what they were doing and how they were working together and where some of the pressures were coming in. So you can add in, other players to it too. So you don't just keep it to the team. You can bring in stakeholders, legal entities, all sorts of stuff, and have a look at the impact they're having on the team as well. And then think about, well, how do we fix this? How do we improve it? What can we do as a team? And some things you can't improve or change, they're fixed. But then you're looking at the bigger picture and perspective, and you can then maybe identify other areas where by shifting something, that's a step towards better. So some lovely mapping tools that you can use, but Lego is a very fun, interactive way for a team to map and think about it.
So it's qualitative, not necessarily quantitative. I don't think there's a way to measure it quantitatively, or I think, or at least I can't imagine it right now. And it differs from team to team as well.
I don't think anybody is really measuring. And I mean, some of those awful, you've just made me think about those awful ranking curves, where you'd say, oh, well, you're only allowed one at the top and one at the bottom. That would say that if you've got a brilliant team full of amazing people, that they couldn't all be, exceeds performance. And that's utter nonsense. I mean, my view would be if everybody's in flow, they're probably all excelling. And so that team, everybody would be playing their part to such a high standard. So the whole team should be getting the top scores. Yeah.
We started with resilience, and there was one question that I had in mind really before we had this conversation. And that was, how do you look at resilience in the context of ever-changing teams? Because nowadays teams are very fluid. Very few companies have stagnant teams. And even if there is a functional team, like an HR team, which is quite stable, they tend to participate in different other teams, like project teams.
Well, even, I'm just thinking lots of teams that are around all the time. You can think of your factory-based teams, for example. There's people coming and going off sick, getting promoted, new people getting hired in. There's people shifting all the time. I think if you can keep the same members of a team in place for 6 months, you're doing really well, is my view in the multinationals we work with. So teams need to think about how they do the beginnings and endings. And we've got checklists for people joining and leaving, but they're very HRy and processy. And I saw some lovely research which talked about when people are joining, they get up the learning curve much better if you acknowledge how much that person is bringing. Because let's face it, we hire people who've got good experience and who are going to bring all of that. So why then do we spend an induction plan telling them that they need to learn everything before they can do the job properly? Actually, what we should be talking about is all the great things we're looking forward to experiencing with them and what they bring. And so getting teams to think about an induction process and a sharing process where the existing team members share why they're really excited about somebody coming on board and what they're looking forward to learning from them and working with them on. And the person who's coming in saying why they're really excited to bring all the stuff they're bringing and what they're looking forward to getting. It's a much more appreciative approach. But then this research showed that people went up that learning curve and were much higher performing than people who went through it the traditional way. And I think we need to do the same for endings as well. So when people leave, we need to have, not just our bye, thank you, really appreciate their contribution. There's that knowledge management piece. Have we handed things over well? But also that we've learned from them, even when people leave under a cloud. because there are times that happens. But the fact is, if it just gets not said, everybody's like, where did Jack go? Then it's there. It's part of the system, isn't it? So I think we need to acknowledge what's happened, talk about it, talk about the person and what they've contributed, and find a way to appreciate it, and they move on. Yeah.
It makes me think of finally making the link between recruitment, onboarding, and development. Because we've complained about it very much, right? You put a person sometimes through 13, 14 interviews, you try to learn everything about them. But then the moment they start in the company, it's like a blank slate, like you know nothing about them and they have to do everything from zero.
I know. It's such a waste, absolute waste. It's crazy. We could have an amazing 2-year development plan from all that recruitment data, and it's just thrown in a file somewhere in case someone asks, how did you recruit them? It's just, such a gap, such an opportunity. I haven't found anybody who does it well yet.
No, me neither. But maybe there's an opportunity to build some routines along this. Some topics of reflection, topics of discussion, some meetings that you can have early on with the people while you are onboarding them. So you can have that knowledge sharing and understanding what is your purpose, the team is working on, and what the new person can contribute with, and what they can learn.
And, bringing the new person on. So, working with some teams at the moment where new people are coming and going, just building into their standard team meeting process, a way of introducing them, sharing what the reason is and all the work that people have done, and getting them to contribute to it and adjusting it. Because why would it stay static? You've moved on since you had the initial conversation. Somebody's left and somebody new's come in. It's changed shape. So we should look at the new shape of it. And so just reminding people you don't need to spend hours on this, but you do need to spend a bit of time talking about it and bringing that person on board and including them in it, and then see where it goes next, because, the reason might look slightly different. At least their intrinsic reason for being there needs to be included. And even talking about, the results and having the clarity of results and what those are going to look like. It will have shifted since the previous time, and now you've got a new person there. So they'll have a different view, and getting their perspective will enrich the whole conversation and the discussion. So I think it's building those conversations and discussions and debates into the team meeting. Say, right, we're going to have 30 minutes. And then as they go through, reviewing all the routines and saying, right, maybe it's time we just refer back. Let's talk about what we've all learned this month, or, action learning reviews is another part of resilience, which is how do we learn from what went wrong and what went right? And let's celebrate both. But that needs to be built in. You don't want it some big thing that only happens when there's a disaster, which feels like a big blame exercise. So these things need to be discussed regularly, and talk about, the successes and what made it so successful. That's a key part. And the other piece is about energy, and helping individuals manage their energy. So that's looking out for each other. So, this links back into that well-being, but it's noticing somebody's really quiet. Is something going on for them outside of work? Or are they overloaded? Do they need a hand? So noticing and taking care of each other and helping each other manage energy is important.
Did you notice with the 162 teams you've been working, any actions to improve the team that you would call best practices, something that you would share and you would say, hey, maybe each team should experiment with this or try this?
Yeah, I think each team should just start talking about, what does trust mean to me? What do people need to do so I trust them, and what do I need to see so that I can trust people? So, that two-way conversation, and just start to talk about it. It's really interesting. There's no right or wrong, and it just starts, to get people to think about what those things are. Some people might say, well, I can't trust someone who wears red. I mean, that's their, it's like, really? What's that about? And somebody else might say, I can't trust somebody who's late. There's a whole range of different things. Or I always trust someone, who makes me a cup of tea. So it doesn't matter what it is. Those are trivial things I've come up with. But the kind of stuff that people share is just a little step towards understanding each other better, and having those conversations. And then nice warm-ups within team meetings that you can just build in on your weekly check-ins. Take 10 minutes. Yeah.
I told you I have so many questions, and I can't stop noticing that we are talking about tacit knowledge a lot. Did you see any teams that tried to transform tacit knowledge into explicit knowledge, maybe by writing it down and updating their routines and the findings and the learnings? Or transmitting this tacit knowledge in a more formal way?
Yeah, I mean, I worked with some teams who got to use storytelling, and then collected the stories and analysed the stories and then pulled out the knowledge. And it was a big knowledge management exercise. The trouble with that, I mean, the wonderful thing is to do that, but it needs a lot of resource and a lot of skill. And what I would say is sad is a lot of that knowledge then just got put in a database that nobody ever accessed. So much of tacit knowledge is tacit and it stays with us as humans. And I think, we'll see what goes with artificial intelligence, but that's another day. But I think in the meantime, I think we just need to make sure that we're telling all the stories and we're giving time for sharing our experiences and what works and how people are and what our stakeholders think. And if we're too fast moving and too action oriented, that's the stuff that gets missed, that sharing of the tacit knowledge. And that is a glue that takes us from one time period to the next. And it's the thing that when people leave, we're like, oh, they've gone with all of that. So, yeah. But I have seen teams using things like storytelling, creating icons which describe, and archetypes. So there are processes that you can use to do it, but I've never seen anybody do it really well where it is durable and sustainable.
Another thing that comes to mind while we were talking about all of this is leaders. And what is their role in enabling these high-performing teams?
Yeah, well, sometimes leaders don't know what high performance is either. Or should I say they've not sat and thought about it. Mm-hmm. So I think, again, it's a reflective moment is needed to say, what is high performance? Do we really want it? What would it bring? Is it worth investing in? And my answer to all of those would be yes, absolutely. But, I don't think leaders really think about it enough. And you don't need a lot of time to think about it. And of course, the leader is a member of the team. They might not be the same as all the other members of the team. They have a special role in the team, but they are a key component of the team. And, they set a lot of the pace, not all of it. But, what they really do is enable that team to have a culture, an environment, a tone. And I think the leader needs to be intentional about all of those. And that's where, some team coaching, both for the leader and the team, can be really helpful and just help them to unpick some of those things about, well, what kind of team do we want? And how would it be? And how do I, as a leader, enable that to happen?
Do you have any tips and tricks to share with the leaders? Something that they could do right from the get-go and make this process easier, smoother?
Yeah, apart from phoning me, I'd say, sit down and think about your team as a group and think about, as a collective, where are we and where do I want us to go as a group? What could be really aspirational for it, and then ask your team. don't do it on your own. This isn't something that you do to them. Have some thoughts beforehand, but then take the team and say, we've got half an hour. I'm going to ask you this. Where do you think we could be by this time next year? And challenge them, ask them really what could be possible, and get the team to help co-create it, the what ifs. And then you can look at, well, where should we start? What could we work on first? And the team will always come up with stuff. So they do.
They always do, right? Because no one comes to work thinking, hey, I don't want to perform today. I just want to suck at my work.
No, nobody wants to come to work and say, I don't want to do any work and I want to have a horrible day. I don't want to get on with anybody. And, I want to wind everybody up. So I think when we start to get the team involved and say, well, what would it be like for you? And how can we do that without, saying, oh, we're going to add all this stuff? Because nobody wants extra work. They've got enough to do. So we have to do it as part of existing processes. And that's where the leader, I think, needs to consider, how do I give the team a bit more bandwidth so that we've got some time to look at ourselves and find ways to work smarter, more effectively, and in a way that's much more satisfying and engaging and empowering. And that's when you suddenly see that shift happen, which is really exciting.
Ali, do you know what I just realized is that I never asked you where does the passion for teams come from? Because at some point you started with individuals, right? Skill sets, Corn Fairy stuff and all of that, and leadership development. But then quite a few years ago, you moved to teams. So I never asked you where the passion for teams comes from.
I think it's, one, I was really lucky to be in some amazing teams and to have some amazing teams work for me. So that experience, I think, is always, sat with me. That is something that I like to, I'd like to see other people be able to experience and create. And I also think the penny dropped when I was noticing that, and it's back to our point about individuals flourishing, that if you're with other people who are flourishing too, it's even better. You just grow and challenge and support, and it's amazing. And that's when I thought, that's where teams come in. Teams are the glue to help us all perform at an amazing level and get results we never thought were possible. And at the same time, try out and do things in, a safe way that we might not have been able to do as a lonely individual. And it feels good. It's where real friendships are made too. So I think that penny dropped for me, and it was like, wow, and we just need to bring it all together. And I think also it was that understanding that actually if you bring the reason, the results, the routines, the relationships and resilience into one frame, and you think about teams in that way, what you're actually doing is enabling, that interdependency and that connectedness to empower the group. And so, and I love working with groups. And it's never done, because people are always changing. Like we said, they come and go. The context changes. So, masks on, masks off, bubbles. You're in, you're out, you're working from home. I mean, the things are always going on. But the world is changing too. So, nothing stays the same for teams. And I think it's, for me, very, very rewarding place to work.
And it's challenging capturing that dynamism and flow of teams. Very challenging.
Yeah, well, I like complexity. So,
You do. I think you're quite good with complexity. And all the VUCA world, you're just easily swimming in it.
No. So it's an area that really I find really exciting. And I think, enabling teams and all the individuals in that to be able to flourish in such a complex VUCA world, I think is really, satisfying. Yeah.
Before we finish this, anything that maybe we didn't talk about and you wanted to talk or share with the listeners regarding teams?
Well, I think, not to feel alone. There's lots of support out there, but don't think about teams as just one-off away days, I would say. Think of it as a journey, and, that you'll reach milestones and achieve things on the way, but it's the journey that's important too. And yeah, there's lots of support out there. There really is.
Sure. Alison, thank you so much for today. And for those who want to find you, email, LinkedIn.
Yeah, so you can join me on LinkedIn, so Alison Grieve. You could look on, we've now got a program on team coaching, so if anybody wants to become a team coach, they can go on our program, which is now with the International Coaching Federation, the ICF. It's certified with them. And of course, we've got a website and you can connect with me through that too. So I love to hear from people. Even if you just want to ask a question, I'm always happy to have a chat.